Welcome to your source of comic book news and culture. This is Variant Edition.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Eddie.
And I'm Nick, and we're out of the shop.
Normally we tell you that Variant Edition Tuesdays bring you the latest headlines in the world of comics and a sneak peek at what comics you shouldn't miss on Wednesday.
Oh, we try to fit this all into 5 minutes.
Well, not this week.
You see, Wednesday is Halloween, so we've got a special expanded Variant Edition Tuesday.
If you haven't been paying attention, we're all huge horror movie freaks on Variant Edition, so Halloween is our favorite holiday.
And in the spirit of this glorious holiday, we're going to be sharing some of our favorite scary, spooky, and horror-related comics.
Yeah, we were thinking about doing some kind of lame Blair Witch kind of thing since we're outside, but we figured, hey, outside, in the woods in Jersey, scary enough as it is.
So sit back and prepare to be fed a bloody dose of comic knowledge that will prepare you to step into your comic shop this Halloween.
Hi, I'm Lewis, and here's some of the comics that you should find at shops this week. DC seems to have gone Countdown crazy. Keep your eyes peeled for Countdown to Final Crisis 26, Countdown to Adventure number 3, Countdown to Mystery 2, and Countdown Lord Havoc and the Extremists number 1. Outside of the mega company-wide crossover, check out Action Comics 858 with art by new series regular Gary Frank, and Batman 670, which serves as a prelude to the resurrection of Ra's al Ghul. Marvel has a mid-sized week with highlights including Daredevil Annual number 1, Iron Man 23, and Submariner number 5. Outside of the big two, we've got Dynamo 5 number 8, Mouse Guard Winter 1152 number 2, Samurai Commando Mission 1549 volume 2, Savage Dragon 133, Archaea Studio Press's very slick Secret History books 3 and 4, Special Forces number 1, Wasteland 13, and Tales of the Fear Agent 12 Steps in 1. Oh, and don't forget the Halloween-related DC Infinite Halloween special. Anita Blake Vampire Hunter for the First Death, number 2, and the long-awaited compilation of the first story arc from the hit Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 8. Our pick of the week, X-Men Messiah Complex number 1. It might just be marketing speak, but Marvel's promising some huge changes to the X-Men franchise, and it all starts here.
Hi, I'm Nick, and these are your headlines for Tuesday, October 30th, 2007. If you haven't seen the online trailers for the upcoming I Am Legend, do yourself a huge favor and check them out. We love zombie survival horror movies, so Variant Edition is looking forward to December. But we're not sure how loosely the film will be based on the original. Anybody remember 1971's Omega Man?
Yes.
Anyway, we don't have to wait until Will Smith hits the big screens. IDW adapted Richard Matheson's classic 1954 novel that the film will be based on. Can't find the graphic novel in the shops? Don't worry. IDW just announced that it was going to a new pressing and should be back in stock soon. Oh, and 30 Days a Night fans, the adaptation is by none other than Steve Niles. The Hero Initiative, the charity that helps older comic creators in medical or financial need, will be auctioning off what might be the ultimate addition to a comic fan's library. The Hero Library is a collection of 52 great hardcover and trades which feature one-of-a-kind original sketches. Starting November 1st, each week the Hero Initiative will auction one book. Artists contributing will include Jerry Ordway, Mike Allred, Sam Keith, Simon Bisley, Tom Rainey, J.G. Jones, Mark Silvestri, and more to be announced. Okay, it's time for Eddie with a look at some comic book-related movie news.
Thanks, Nick. The in-development Justice League movie isn't the only DC property getting some press lately. Variety has reported that The Flash and Green Lantern are making their leaps to the big screen. Early word is that Greg Berlanti is on board to direct the Green Lantern. No word yet on which Green Lantern they plan on going with, but The Hollywood Reporter seems to think it will be Hal Jordan. As for the Flash movie, expect that to be a follow-up of Justice League and expect it to be more comedic as the director David Dobkin is known for that type of film. He's the third director attached to the property and will continue to keep you up to date with any news on this or other comic-related movies. Nick?
Finally, perhaps trumping the alleged find of a Detective Comics number 27 in an attic, comes news that a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15 fetched $227,000 in a Comic Link auction this month, the highest price for any comic from the 60s. The comic was graded 9.4, so it's no surprise it went for so much. That's it for the news this week. We'll see you next time.
Okay, so since it's Halloween, we decided, hey, why not talk a little bit about horror comics? Now, I know what you're thinking. You love horror comics, monsters and zombies aplenty. But years ago, you wouldn't be able to get your horror comics fix. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's go back to what I like to think of the beginning. It was the 1940s, and the first horror comic that I'm aware of was printed, a comic book adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Later we would enjoy such titles as Crypt Keeper, The Vault Keeper, and The Old Witch. All of these comics put out by EC Comics. That's right, educational comics almost failed, so they switched over to a new topic of horror, and Tales of the Macabre were easy to find.
However, since they were so easy to find, it's no wonder that the U.S. Senate found them and would later investigate the link between horror comics and juvenile delinquency. the government decided that a ratings board should be formed to watch what kids were reading. I'm sure the government would have liked to have handled this with an MPAA or the FCC, but the industry responded by monitoring themselves with the Comics Code Authority.
The rules were stacked against horror comics, with the simple rule that comics could not present scenes of instruments associated with Walking Dead, torture, vampires, vampirisms, ghouls, cannibalisms, and werewolfisms. And of course, titles could not include the words horror or terror.
Now, years later, some comics would pop up that had elements of horror in them, but to me, this resurgence in horror comics really restarted in 2002 with IDW's, Steve Niles, and Ben Templesmith's title, 30 Days of Night, which by now I'm sure you all know about. If that means you've seen the movie or read the actual comic, you've witnessed a small piece of history.
Of course, the CCA was disbanded in 2001, and by that act, it was allowed horror comics to flourish. We know that there were some non-Comics Code horror comics before 30 Days of Night, but the new wave of modern horror comics really started back up again with Niles' most popular work, and went into full swing with Robert Kirkman's The Walking Dead.
So there you go. You learn a little bit of comic history that maybe now you'll have a bit more respect for horror comics in general.
And with that little bit of history out of the way, let's talk what we here at Variant Edition feel are our favorite horror comics. Mine personally would be the lovely graphic novel adaptation of I Am Legend by with Steve Niles doing it. I mean, it was just really nicely done. The art is a crisp black and white, and it really makes you, I think it makes you care about the lead character more than Omega Man did in its original version. Maybe they'll do a better job with this I Am Legend with Will Smith, but I really enjoy reading that comic. I read it once a year at least, usually around Halloween time. I've done it for the last 3 years, and it's like a couple days worth of reading. Like if you space it out, it's just fun to read. But we got Lewis off to the side, so I'm going to step off and let Lewis on here. Lewis is going to talk to you a little bit about, come on here, Lewis, what he likes.
Now, the thing that I find interesting about this, you're mainly like the Marvel guy, so hearing him talk about horror comics is kind of refreshing.
Well, my pick is definitely 30 Days of Night, just because it's the eeriness, the colors, and the fact of the matter is that you really have nowhere to run. You're in Alaska, where can you run but off an iceberg? It's a no escape situation, and it's just horrifying because you actually have to think of a survival plan, even though the chances don't look that good at all in your favor. But I love the art, the writing, and with the movie, it just it went together so well, and it's just definitely one of my favorites. I need to get into more horror comics because that just did it for me.
Definitely, Lewis. Definitely. So
I'm gonna have to go with Walking Dead. That's been my favorite horror comic since the start. I mean, it started off as a zombie comic, and then it turned into a psychological horror thriller of survival, which has great character development, and it's over the extended years that that it's been out, it's just like you get so into the characters and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone's expecting me to be like, oh, Walking Dead is my favorite. Granted, love it to death, no pun intended, but I don't see it as so much of like a horror comic. Granted, it's got zombies, but I mean, if you guys have been reading it, 43 and everything else has gone like above and beyond that. It's more survival and people. So for like the horror aspect of it, I have to say the first and what I say best story for Criminal Macabre that came out. It was the introduction of Cal McDonald, the introduction of Moloch, who's like his ghoul partner, and all he does, he's kind of like some druggy, alcoholic, wannabe detective who just looks into paranormal stuff. And the best thing about the first story was it took the whole world of like vampires, zombies, and werewolves and stood it on its head. It wasn't like, oh, to kill a werewolf it was silver. No, Cal McDonald's theory, nothing on this earth can withstand a blast from a shotgun, and that's how it goes down. And it breaks down the whole mythos of vampires and werewolves from being so many generations of it is like the effect is worn off. So they're not really like, susceptible to everything else. Well, they are susceptible to everything else, but it's not like the traditional ways. And then they bring it back in like such a big bang, and the characters are so great. It's so creepy, and Steve Niles, Ben Templesmith, great combination for a horror comic. So Criminal Macabre's my pick.
I still remember when you let me borrow that for the first time, and I was blown away.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
And just for the fact that, like, Cal McDonald pals around with a ghoul and he, like, shoots him if he scares him. He's like, I'm not dead, but this suit gets holes in it, or some smart-ass remark like that. This is great.
And, of course, there's one more person, Variant Edition, and he's usually behind the camera, but he's going to come out and say little words for you, or we might turn the camera around. I don't know what we're doing yet. But he's Kevin. What do you got?
I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead, but that's already been picked. But I'm going to go with something a little more recent. I read something called Dead West by Rick Spears and Rob G. Very cool. It starts out as a Western. It could be a spaghetti Western kind of thing. You've got your bounty hunter looking for this, big fat guy. He goes into town. The town's empty. It's really weird. And then zombies, like, pop out of everywhere. And later you find out that it's this whole thing with You know, the Indians, they killed all the Indians to build the town, and of course, Indians have their revenge. It's kind of cool. I like it because it's not your typical zombie kind of book. You don't see zombies in that, you know, Western genre very well, or if you do, they're not done very well. So it's a more recent book, but I don't know, I think it's the best horror-related thing I've read lately.
That's a really interesting pick. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't constantly see zombies and Western cowboys running around, so.
That's just...
This is an awesome comic. I did read it.
Yeah, so we got that's our horror picks, and that's a little history about horror comics in general. Maybe you guys will go out and pick up some now and open up the door to that little part of your imagination that says this is a good thing.
Yeah, and since they've been having like those essentials combinations, I know they have like some combinations of Tomb of Dracula, Tales of the Zombie, those old school horror comics. So if you guys want to look into that, definitely check those out.
Absolutely. Well, that's your horror book knowledge there.
Yep, so that's pretty much it for the Halloween episode of Variant Edition Tuesdays.
So go out and buy some horror comics and read it on Halloween.
Yeah, and rot your teeth out with candy.
All right, that's it for our special Halloween flavored Variant Edition Tuesday.
Yeah, a normal variant edition is enough to give you nightmares, so we apologize for anything truly horrific that may come as a result of watching this week's show.
And remember, Kami Batman says there are quite a few ways to get your Variant Edition fix. iTunes, Vio, YouTube, and Google Video, or get a sweet high-res version from Blip TV. But if you want the easiest way, just head over to variantedition.com and watch us from our page.
And while you're at our page, check out the uncut versions of our interviews. Think you can get those on iTunes? Nope. They're only available through variantedition.com.
That's it for Variant Edition Tuesday. See you next time.
All right.
Well, we could have ended it with happy hauntings.
I know somebody's supposed to say, now how do we get home?
How do we get home?
I'm gonna wear your skin to my birthday party.